A startling case out of Tennessee. A woman there is facing serious charges for not only allegedly stealing medicine from a hospital patient's active IV drip, but also for allegedly dressing up as a nurse to get access to that patient's room. We're breaking down the shocking case as more details are revealing this isn't the first time she's been caught up in something like this before. Hi everyone and welcome to Inside the Crime. So the alleged imposter previously worked as a nurse, but there's a huge problem. As detectives were investigating this case, they learned she was reportedly practicing in the state without ever actually holding a state nursing license. Now imagine you're a patient in the hospital. You're either there for a major medical problem or a routine checkup, and then you learn someone posing as a nurse stole your needed medicine straight from your IV. It truly sounds like something out of a movie or even a TV show, right? But that's what police are claiming happened in Nashville, Tennessee. So let's start from the beginning. About 2 weeks ago, Marissa Denton allegedly went to Ascension St. Thomas Midtown Hospital in Nashville, posing as a nurse. And according to police and hospital staffers, she went full out. She wasn't in just regular clothes. She reportedly dressed up in medical scrubs and entered the private area under false pretenses. According to police, she seemed to know what she was doing. She allegedly used a plastic syringe to draw 4 milliliters of propofol from an active drip that was attached to the patient. If you're curious what propofol is, according to Mayo Clinic, it's an anesthetic and sedative used to help people relax and sleep. According to Fox 17 in Nashville, the hospital began investigating how she entered a non-public area of the hospital without authorization. The outlet says they received a tip that staff were notified about a woman impersonating a nurse going into patients' rooms. A hospital spokesperson said that a non-authorized person was trying to gain access to a patient's prescribed medication. Then staff intervened and were able to stop it from escalating. And while the hospital never mentioned Marissa Denton by name, this is what they had to say about it in a statement. An individual entered a non-public area of our facility in an apparent attempt to gain access to a patient's prescribed medication. A member of our staff intervened immediately and prevented the access. Our security team responded and reported the matter to law enforcement personnel. The individual was arrested by the Metro Nashville Police Department. We are cooperating fully with law enforcement as this investigation proceeds. The safety and well-being of our patients is our highest priority. We have taken immediate steps to enhance our security, including additional training for staff on access protocols. Marissa was charged with impersonation of a licensed professional, but her alleged actions left so many questions, mainly why and has she done something like this before? Well, detectives were stumped on the motive initially. Then, as with most cases, more details came to light. Like that she allegedly did the same thing 2 days earlier. According to police, Marissa is facing more charges after a separate incident at another hospital. This one at Vanderbilt University Medical Center, which is also located in Nashville. Those charges came after Marissa was allegedly spotted in that hospital entering a 6th-floor critical care unit. She allegedly was seen in blue medical scrubs and a face mask posing as a nurse there too. And in that case, police claim she unlawfully got access to a patient's room and removed 100 milliliters of propofol without authorization too. Now, in order to pull something like this off, you're going to need to know what you're doing, like experience-wise. What's also interesting is on Marissa's social media page, there are photos of her when she worked as a nurse back in 2020. Some of those captions include, "So happy to work with such a great team, #Bayview, #PCNurse." But court records reportedly revealed that Marissa was practicing as a nurse without ever holding a nursing license in the state of Tennessee. And what's scarier is her nursing license had reportedly been revoked or even suspended in multiple states. According to the report by Fox 17, records from the Tennessee Board of Nursing reveal Marissa worked for Suncrest Home Health in Clarksville, Tennessee in 2023, where she was allegedly caught on surveillance video stealing a patient's wife's engagement ring. She reportedly admitted to the steal. She returned the ring, was arrested, but the charge was later dismissed and reportedly expunged. And then a year later, in November of 2024, the Tennessee board reportedly revoked her multi-state nursing privilege, which was tied to her Maryland license. Then in December of that same year, she was found unresponsive in a bathroom at a hospital in Kentucky with syringes nearby. Detectives there say she admitted to taking propofol and Dilaudid, which is an opioid. The Kentucky Board of Nursing reportedly suspended her ability to practice there. And just 9 months from that incident, that brings us to her latest cases. Right now, she's charged with 2 counts of impersonation of a licensed professional and 1 count of theft. Her total bond is more than $125,000, and she's supposed to appear in court later this week. This is a Law&Crime legal alert. There are allegations claiming that the online apps like DraftKings and FanDuel are engineered for addiction. These multi-billion-dollar companies allegedly continue to put profit over safety. Every free bet, every boosted parlay, and every small payout triggers a dopamine rush that creates dependency and turns harmless fun into a detrimental habit. They keep you hooked, chasing impossible wins, and trap you in a cycle that can lead to significant financial loss and ultimately damage mental health. Our legal sponsors are taking on the online gambling industry to potentially get compensation for all those who have been impacted. So if you or your loved one has suffered addiction, financial hardship, or mental health issues due to sports betting apps, visit gamblinglawsuits.com/insidethecrime to take a short quiz and check your eligibility to file a claim. I'm joined now by trial attorney and federal litigator Alexis Rosenberg. Alexis, thank you so much for joining me today. Have you seen a case like this before where someone is accused of impersonating a nurse, stealing medicine from a patient, and allegedly this wasn't a one-off instance? What's your reaction to this case?
Well, unfortunately, this happens more often than not. A
Mm.
lot, it's especially related to the stealing of the narcotics.
Mhm.
It is a problem, and hospitals do have to take in certain protocols and considerations to enable to prevent this, even from their staff. Nurses and physicians that are on staff, so that these things are try and reduce the amount of times that this happens.
And I understand that from those who are actively working in the hospital, but for someone who has really no current ties to this hospital, how do they just walk into these units that are supposed to have these safe measures that patients are supposed to feel safe and secure in and do something like this, especially from an active IV drip? Like that to me is just mind blowing.
It is a little crazy that she just walked off the streets in scrubs and was able to
Mm-hmm.
get to a patient, as well as have the time and ability without somebody noticing her on staff that she didn't belong there, to take what you're referring to is the syringe. And then ultimately we find out that she took a whole entire bag of narcotics.
Mm-hmm.
So the fact that that didn't raise any alerts to anybody, I agree with you, and especially the full bag, because really a hospital should have that locked up, and there should be a process to be able to, in essence, check that bag out. And her to be able to do that is questionable. Why they didn't have those protocols in place.
And for a patient who I feel like is just so extremely vulnerable at a hospital or in any type of hospital setting, could it be possible that this patient or these patients allegedly not only just sue Marissa, but possibly also the hospitals too?
It is possible because they do have an obligation to protect those patients. In this particular instance, I believe that only a small amount was taken out of the bag. That potentially would reduce like the level of pain that this particular patient was having. I don't believe that it's come out that there was some sort of damage or other than maybe a short-term discomfort. I'm not 100% sure about that. But unfortunately, this patient did most likely sustain some sort of discomfort because they were not getting the appropriate level of that medication that was supposed to relieve their pain, which is huge. I mean, you have this
Mm-hmm.
patient that has gone through a surgery and has sustained that. So they could bring a lawsuit against the hospital because of that, but they would have to prove some sort of damages and the extent of that. The other issue is that she did go in and view many patients. I think it was 100 plus patients' files at one of the hospitals, which is a HIPAA violation. And
Mm-hmm.
if they don't have protocols, there are civil penalties, meaning that the hospital would not have to pay the patient, but would have to pay the government for like a fine for their lack of having those appropriate protocols and allowing that to happen as well.
And as someone who has a lot of expertise in this kind of area, in your opinion, who is kind of more liable here if a civil claim were to come about? Is it Marissa Denton or is it the hospital, given that all of this had happened there?
Well, there wouldn't be the civil penalty would be against the hospital,
Mhm.
talking about HIPAA. Now, with regard to Denton, the likelihood is that she doesn't have any money. So even if that particular patient that she stole the narcotics out, with the syringe was to sue her, most likely there's not going, because now she's lost, she doesn't have a license anymore in any state. So there's not probably an ability to actually get any money. Now, against the hospital, yes, there is a potential claim, but how much was the patient damaged by what occurred? The civil penalty and the lack of the protocols is very concerning. The hospital should be in full investigation mode as to how this took place and how they're going to move forward so it never takes place again.
And this is case it gives that this person has done this before. And so were you surprised to find out that Marissa allegedly had been practicing as a nurse in Tennessee without actually ever holding a license in that particular state? Now, she has held licenses in other states, but then those were revoked. But talk to me a little bit about how that all works, where you have somebody who was practicing as a nurse in one state, then somehow she ends up practicing in another state, but without a license. How does that all happen?
Well, so the hospital is supposed to credential. Basically, when they hire a nurse, they go in and make sure that they are in good standing and they have an appropriate license. So there seems to be something, dropping the ball there. Although I do believe, like you had mentioned before, the one time she just walked in off the street, so she wasn't employed by the hospital. I think maybe the other hospital prior to her losing her license, where we have the HIPAA violations, I think she may have been employed, but not as an RN. I'm not sure about that. Now, previous to November of 2024, she did have a license in a couple different jurisdictions. There was an incident, I don't remember which particular state, that she was accused of theft, and related to that incident, her license was revoked. Now, when you have a license in multiple states as a nurse and one state revokes your license, the other states are going to follow, because we don't want somebody who's had their license revoked in one state to just move to a different state and then be, practicing when there was a valid reason to have their license revoked. So I think post that, that's when we have her going in, which appears that she potentially, has an addiction problem, which is the motivation for this. We don't know that for sure, but it would appear that that's possibly the case, that she was going in and now pretending or impersonating a nurse to get access to these narcotics.
And where do you think kind of the entire where do you think kind of that line was between, okay, we need to stop her now, as opposed to when something like this could have happened and it did end up happening and now we're in the predicament that we're in? But do you think that there could have been a stop to her even sometime in the past?
I would have liked to see the first licensing board who it came to their attention, that put her in some sort of program. So the licensing boards, because this is an issue that does come up, unfortunately, pretty regularly, having to do with addiction. They have programs that they can put these nurses and healthcare professionals, and even lawyers have similar programs that our licensing boards have structured to monitor and put in certain restrictions. Sometimes, they can still work, but it has to be supervised. It depends on that. So I would have liked for her to go into one of those programs so she could have gotten the help that she needed and potentially still maintained her license. It seems like whatever happened, she could have just ignored the notice of that initial complaint against her, and then in that case, that board would have had nothing, no other option other than to revoke her license, because they have to protect the public. I mean, from her actions. So it seems like maybe she was a little too far along in that potential, alleged addiction process, that by the time the licensing board got involved, she wasn't necessarily open to getting help. Now, of course, we don't know that for sure. I'm just expressing some of the things over my career I have seen.
And there's probably no chance ever that she could possibly get her license back in any type of way, could she?
I wouldn't say there's no chance. There
Mm.
is a process for it. She
Mhm.
would have to be able to go in and show that she got necessary treatment, as well as, she's been, clean, for a certain amount of time, and then she could potentially go back in some jurisdictions, and it does vary from state to state, but go back and try to petition to get her license back. Generally, what happens is you need to go back to the first state that revoked your license, and then petition and get them to agree to allow you to have your license in some format back, and then you can go back to the subsequent states and do it. But I wouldn't say it's an impossibility, but it would be an uphill battle.
Especially probably in light of this case too, and given the charges she's just now facing, because I'm kind of assuming that possibly more charges could be added. But are you surprised something like maybe aggravated assault wasn't added to the list of charges that she faces, or something kind of a little more serious than just impersonating a nurse and theft? Are you surprised more charges haven't been added to her just yet?
Well, impersonating a doctor is a felony.
Mhm.
She could face upwards of 15 years.
Mm.
But the one that was a little surprising to me was, at this point, it appears she only has a misdemeanor for stealing the narcotics while
Mhm.
impersonating, a professional. So that was kind of surprising. We don't, there's little facts out about what happened
Mhm.
later, last year in 2024. So there potentially could be charges that come out related to that incident as well. One of the things when you have a nurse or something related to the healthcare industry, sometimes it's a little more delayed for the police to get the necessary information that they need because of HIPAA. So there's
Mm.
some, steps that have to be taken in order for the hospital or doctor's offices to turn over those files to law enforcement. So that may be why she hasn't gotten that. I just hope that when this goes to trial, that she ends up getting what appears to be the help she needs, because this does appear to me to be someone who needs counseling and addiction therapy, opposed to maybe being thrown into prison.
And how hard is it to prosecute or litigate a case like this when you do have something as sensitive as hospital records that you're having to deal with and having to comb through in terms of, discovery and all the other legal matters and even evidence? But how difficult is it to the point where could this case possibly go to trial anytime soon if it does go to trial?
Well, once you get past the HIPAA and they can get the actual records,
Hmm.
it's not that difficult, because they should, there's, we're talking about a narcotic, so there's tracking of those.
Hmm.
They have to, when it comes in, how much the hospital has, how it's dispensed. So the hospital should have those records readily available once they get permission to release them. With regard to impersonating, I think it's pretty clear, because in this particular situation, you had the patient's husband, be able to identify, it's my understanding, her, identify what took place, meaning, she went over there, there was a syringe. It appears, I believe, that he was in the room for a lot of this interaction, as well as I'm sure that there were other people that probably, when questioned, could also identify that they saw her in there and this is what she was doing at the time, even though they may not have at the time brought it to anybody's attention or thought it was unusual.
And I'm sure being inside a hospital system, there are plenty of surveillance cameras and video evidence that I'm sure a lot of investigators and prosecutors can comb through too. And Alexis, I'm curious, what do you think is going to happen next in terms of her case? Do you think that it's possible maybe down the line she'll accept a plea? How do you think that her defense attorney will defend this case beyond possibly citing, mental health issues and possible drug addiction?
I mean, I would think that her attorney would negotiate a plea in
Mm.
this, and that would probably, I'm not really seeing a defense, because remember, the drug use isn't a defense.
Mhm.
Saying you have an addiction isn't a defense to your crime. Now, when it goes to sentencing, we can look at it as for towards mitigation, depending on the jurisdiction, but that wouldn't come in at trial. So, the best case, if I was representing her, is I would try to negotiate a plea with regard to this. But I really hope in the end, like I stated before, that she does get the help, because what the pattern you're seeing and the things you're seeing from the previous allegations, it does appear this is driven from an addiction sort of scenario, opposed to someone who's trying to harm a patient. That I'm not seeing that. Now, in the end, taking a patient's narcotics or any drugs or impersonating a professional, is against the law and could very well have created a lot of damage. And unfortunately, that could have happened. Unfortunately, in this case, it doesn't appear it did.
Yeah, and thankfully the patients are okay. And Alexis, I want to thank you as well too for your insight into this case. I really appreciate your time today. Before we sign you off though, is there anything else you'd like to add as a possible maybe kind of cautionary tale to other people who might try to do the same, and just how serious this can really be?
Well, I think as a patient, you have to advocate for yourself. And this husband, it appeared, was advocating for his wife. And if you're in a situation where you come out of surgery and you've had surgery and you know how you react to, let's say, painkillers, and you feel like you're in a higher level of pain than you have previously, then I would definitely bring it to someone's attention without you don't want to accuse someone of wrongdoing, but you definitely want to bring it to another, the physician, MD, say, listen, this is what's going on, so that they can at least do an investigation, because it really is a lot easier, the syringe situation, to take the narcotics out of that bag when you have somebody that is the nurse on staff, for instance. Now, there are plenty of good nurses. We don't want to, put everybody under this, but addiction is a problem in the United States.
Well, very wise words, Alexis. Again, thank you so much for your time and your insight into this case. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
Online records show Marissa Denton's next court appearance is slated for September 30th. As of this recording, no plea has been entered yet. Thanks so much for joining us on Inside the Crime. I'm Elizabeth Millner.